platforms.
All right, guys, thank you.
Here now is Nile Gardiner, and from the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom Heritage Foundation Director, and Shankar Singham, Institute of Economic Affairs International Trade Director. Nile, let me start with you. We've got a report from our Blake Berman, who's in the Rose Garden, that an EU official is telling him that they are still working on the negotiations to avert new tariffs, no concessions made. Is it possible that the reports of a trade deal, the soybeans, the liquid natural gas, that was premature and someone got it wrong? Or, I mean, why are we waiting, do you think, for this presser?
Well, that's a very good point. A lot of confusing signals being sent actually from different EU officials. My sense is that the European Commission, the executive branch of the European Union, are not necessarily going to be making major concessions to the United States. I think this is not just about economics for the EU, for the European Commission. This is about politics, it's about power, it's about the big picture strategic vision for the EU. And after all, you're dealing here with unelected European Union bureaucrats, actually, who at the end of the day are not really accountable to European publics. And I think you have a strongly anti-American mood actually in Brussels right now, a very strong anti-Trump sentiment that's there. So I'd be surprised to see some major concessions coming from the European Union today, actually, although there could be some superficial minor concessions.
Are about to come to the podium. Nile, very quickly, whatever concessions, if there are any that are announced, are they legitimate, or is this all pie crust, easily made, easily broken?
You know, I think there's an awful lot of spin that comes from Brussels, from the European Commission, and I would be, you know, very, very skeptical about the EU offering anything of real substance today. And of course, if the European Commission leadership was seen to be making concessions as well, I think there would be accusations in Brussels of basically bowing to President Trump, and that of course would be politically very risky for these officials to do. So I just don't think we're going to see some kind of major deal struck today. And let's not forget the tremendous animosity that exists actually within the Brussels machine against the Trump administration, against the Trump presidency. And there's a deep-seated protectionist mindset that exists within the European Union right now.
Nile, very simply, did the people who poured money into this market in the last 45 minutes, did they just lose a lot of money? Or do you think we might be setting up for a sell-off tomorrow because, as you've just said, this really isn't going to be much of anything with these concessions?
Yes, I mean, we could be seeing some kind of sell-off potentially tomorrow. I think the reality is that the threat of a trade war with the EU, but also, of course, with China as well, has had an overall dampening effect on the US stock markets this year, at a time generally when the US economy has been doing very, very well. But I think that the fear of a trade war has been the #1 factor actually suppressing the rise of the stock market this year. You could see a continuation of that actually.
Or you could see it reverse in exactly the opposite direction if we come out and see some seeds of a deal. I think all the dialogues are going to be tough, Niall. I mean, that's how we got to this place, is that all of these dialogues were very tough and that we were on the losing end of so many of them. And now the president is saying, you know, I mean, it's a completely different change in tone, saying that this is a new phase of a strong relationship, that they're officially putting on hold any new tariffs that may come into play. You know, it's a cease and desist, and that everyone's sitting at the table. And Niall, I mean, speak to a minute about, they both mentioned the energy cooperation and the importation of natural gas, of LNG in the liquid form from the United States to Europe. That is a direct strike at Russia and at the revenue that Russia was pulling out of Europe and holding Europe hostage over energy. That's a big deal. Your take?
Yeah, I mean, overall, a lot of positives here from this press conference. But as Shankar mentioned, you know, the devil is in the detail, and we still have to see really the details of this, and also we have to see what the mood music is actually tomorrow as well, whether there's some sort of return to to harsher rhetoric and language, but overall, certainly, definitely in terms of the optics here today, a lot of positives. And you mentioned the issue of LNG exports, imports, and so on. I do think, as you mentioned, this certainly is a direct jab at the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
It sure is.
President Trump was deeply critical of that pipeline when he went over to the NATO summit in Brussels, and rightly so.
Go.
So that actually is a big positive there.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for sticking